Welcome to another episode of Repeater, a little show about big songs. My name is Evan Barden.
And I'm Pat Cartelli.
And we are here today with Brooklyn-based writer, storyteller, and video maker, Bryan Berlin.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, Bryan.
Hi, Bryan. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you doing okay?
This is my, good day. I think this is my first ever podcast.
Sweet.
Real big day here.
You're in it.
I'm in it.
You're a Moth Story Slam winner. You deserve to be on podcasts.
I'm a Moth Story Slam winner. Yes, that's a 3-time runner-up. They don't let you get that credit out there. But
they don't publicize that.
Yeah,
yeah, you're podcast material at this point, for sure. Well, welcome to the show. We talk to people about songs that mean a lot to them. You're a friend of the show.
Friend of the show.
So you're familiar with how we do. And to get us started, we're going to just talk about something we've been listening to recently. Yeah.
So I'll start. I went and saw Converge and Neurosis play the other night, and my body is still recovering from that. I'm so sore. Several people jumped on me, and that was an interesting experience. But I was very lucky to see, or I don't know if lucky, I've only seen them play twice, but they played a song called Jane Doe, which is off their 2001 album, also called Jane Doe. And that was like a real nice kind of nostalgic thing to get to hear. And it was a lot of fun. I just really enjoyed that.
For anyone who maybe doesn't know, what kind of music are those bands?
So Converge I was reading their Wikipedia page before, and it's very amusing because it's listed as like hardcore punk. Mm-hmm. And then there's a whole dissertation in there about like subgenres of like mathcore and like all that additional stuff. And they're just like, no, we're just kind of a metal band and we do our thing. And then Neurosis are well known for being a kind of like ambient metal, sludge, like everything.
Yeah.
Like each album sounds different. I'm not as familiar with them. They are definitely one of the loudest bands I've ever heard play, and I was starting to fall asleep. Because as my friend Matt says, they have a lot to say, but they are not succinct. So like a 7-minute track that has, 3 very slow chords.
But heavy.
Oh yeah, but it wore on me, and it was great. I really enjoyed getting to see them play, but I could feel my eyelids drooping.
Yeah, it's funny to want to fall asleep to very loud things.
Yeah,
it seems counterintuitive, but sometimes they like zone you out pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
just getting beat up too. It's a whole other.
Yeah,
it's physically exhausting to go to their shows. That's cool. 2 weeks ago, I listened to the entire Michael Jackson solo discography. So I would say I've listened to a lot of Michael Jackson recently, which is a good experience. A lot of nostalgia as well. A lot of trying to, I guess, walk through life, when his songs came out or when I heard them. Obviously, like his first couple albums, I didn't hear until I was I probably heard them all at once. Yeah, because they came out before I was born. It was pretty rad. And then his last 3 albums, which were 2003's Invincible, and then Michael came out right after he died. It was sort of like a play. It was a play to make some money after he died. And then Escape was this album that came out 2 or 3 years ago. Another sort of Jackson family.
From the archives.
Sort of thing. But the thing that astounds me about those last 3 albums is that each one of them has at least one insanely good jam. If not multiple songs that I think are totally good and viable. Because I think he could sound very of the 80s or of the 90s, but he somehow kind of always figured it out. His last main single had Akon on it, and it works. For the time, for the whichever year that came out. I think that was the 2009 album. But I'm Akon's huge right now, and this is great. And on the single off of Escape had Justin Timberlake on it,
Yeah, so he knows what he's doing.
He knew how to stay relevant.
Yeah, he was on it.
Yeah.
But it was cool to also listen to. So he had 3 albums that came out before he was allowed to leave Motown and go to I can't remember, Epic maybe. It's probably wrong. But basically before he started working with Quincy Jones, and he was still like a teeny bopper who was tied into this old Motown contract. And those 3 albums are very like varying in quality. They're not great.
Yeah.
But so it's interesting because his probably worst selling album of all time was right before he recorded Off the Wall, which was then like this like breakout success. And then he had 30 years of uninterrupted, multi-platinum albums. But the album right before all that was his like total low point as a recording artist. So everyone can come back.
Feeling restricted.
Yeah. That's what I've been into.
Cool. I've been like pretty much nonstop listening to that new Waxahachie album. What was it? Out in the Storm? I think that's what it's called. Out in the Storm. But it is great. It's like what's her name? Katie Crutchfield is her. It's like her band. But I probably listened to like 1 or 2 songs of hers before this album came out. And for whatever reason, I was just like listening to this album and just digging every song. And it's like literally just I've nonstop. Like I probably listened through it. It's like a half an hour album. I probably listened to it at least like 3 times through during my workday today. It's just on all the time.
Yeah, it's a really good album. She came through this summer already. She played in Greenpoint,
yes.
I think.
And I think she's coming back at some point after I think it's like before I'm paying attention to it. It's like before she goes out to Europe, I think she's going to like be back here for a second. I'm trying to go.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah, as you should.
So that's been my,
Yeah, I always like when an album surprises you in that way where it's listen to it straight through and then do that 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, and it was somebody who was like I was aware of and I had listened to a little bit and just didn't catch on, and then all of a sudden this was the one that I was like, yes, I'm in.
That's awesome.
I hear that. Very much so. But what song did you want to talk about with us today?
So I brought in a song that is actually a cover of a song because I figured since we're not getting the cover aspect of the live cover, I'd bring in a cover that's probably like one of my favorite covers. And it's Photobooth by Death Cab for Cutie covered by Julien Baker.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's listen to a clip of it right now. Cool.
Anything but the blatant proof was your lips touching mine in the photo booth. And as the summer's ending, the cold air will rush your heart away. You were so condescending. This is all that's left.
Oh yeah, nice. Pat, why do you think Bryan chose that song?
I have so many associations with that band that it's like, to me it reminds me of college. So my assumption would be I don't know. Recently, I've been thinking about how people get into songs, and usually I'm just like, oh, they're in a station wagon listening to it. So I don't know. College, default. Like somebody in college was like, hey, check out this band. And that's the song that stuck
out. Since I've had the privilege of hearing you like tell stories and stuff live, my first assumption is that this was a girl that you liked, like either showed you the song, or more likely would be my guess is that like this was your song in your head. She never knew it though, and you guys maybe never went out. That would be my guess.
It's very close to that. Yeah, like,
but enlighten us.
Yeah, like when I was growing up, my family wasn't a huge like into. My dad liked music. Like my dad played a lot of music and did a lot of. He's in a band now. Like he plays bass in a band, and they like hang out and go to bars and like play covers. So he's always been very musical, but like he listened sort of the same stuff, and I never really got into what he was listening to. And I would like up through like the early 2000s, I was basically just listening to like Sugar Ray, Smash Mouth, the Goo Goo Dolls, like Bare Naked Ladies. Like those are my 4 bands. Were like those 4, and then there was this girl that I had like a huge crush on throughout most of high school, and she was like a lot cooler than me and had older sisters. And I think that was like the thing, right? Where I was the oldest in my family and she had these older sisters, and she never really like totally liked me as much as I liked her, but we eventually became closer friends. But before we became close, she was like, oh, you should check out the Decemberists and Death Cab for Cutie, and gave me Photobooth by Death Cab, and I listened to it and I was like, I don't like this. Like, what? This band is like, eh. And then eventually I started getting like, I listened to, it was right around the time where Transatlanticism came out, like that album, and I like fell into that one day and I was like, whoa, this is good. And then like it was all that time where like then the Postal Service came out with Give Up, and then Plans came out. So it was like this, I don't know, renaissance of Ben Gibbard, I guess. And so I got like very into them and they became my favorite band. But that song was always like not a favorite song of mine, but it was like definitely always associated with this girl, Caitlin, and like our kind of like me always having feelings for her and her always being like, we're just friends. And then just like dealing with that for years and then kind of getting over it. And then this cover, like it was like a song that I never really paid attention to. And then this cover came out and I was like, whoa. And I just heard it in a totally new way, because I don't like, Julien Baker has this like power when she sings. Like she's this just like little person, but has this like really powerful kind of haunting voice. And hearing this song by her just like totally changed it for me. Like it became one of my favorite songs now, even though I don't really listen to the Death Cab versions. Like this is now, like in my head, this is the version of the song that exists. So I don't know. It's taken like a weird. And then 2 weeks ago, I saw Ben Gibbard play live, and he played the song acoustically, and I was like, oh, now I'm kind of like into this. Like I might get back into it. But I think it's just it's such a good cover where he actually heard it and then had her play it with him live at a show. Like,
wow. That's awesome.
I feel like that says something about a cover. If you, if you hear it and you're like, come play this with me, because it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a great cover. And I didn't know about her at all. For some reason, I've never heard of her. I don't know why.
So good. Like I'm very much in that like Waxahachie, but just like a little bit, not as like rocky, but
a little more refined.
Her voice is just so good. Like I saw her at Brooklyn Steel. She opened for the Decemberists a few months ago. And my only like critique of the concert was they didn't let Julien Baker play long enough. She played like 7 songs or something like that. And I was like, this is an injustice. But like that, I don't know if you've been to Brooklyn Steel either, because it's like a new venue, but it's
it opened
big.
like February, right?
Yeah, and it's like, it's not as big as Terminal 5, but it's in that like level of Terminal. I think it's like 3,000 people or something like that. And her voice, like just it's so powerful to hear her voice. It's like this haunting, beautiful voice. And I don't know. There's something about it.
Because I hadn't heard this cover before.
Yeah.
But it's always exciting when something is a headphone song, like when you put it on, because like if I had listened to that through speakers, like my computer speakers, it would have lost a lot of the magic whatever, like because her voice is so haunting, it has like this kind of wispy atmospheric quality, and that, I don't know, that's one of my favorite things, when somebody's a little spooky.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, and again, it's her thing is very much Death Cab's thing, which is why I like think the cover works, is, you know, like kind of like sad songs that are beautiful, like beautiful sad songs has always been like that's like where I live in a music genre. And even like, I mean, all my favorite bands are just kind of like, even if they're happy sounding songs, they're still sad lyrically, like, you know, Frightened Rabbit or The National, which The National has like sad songs too, but it's like, that's my world, and I feel like she just embodies it very well.
I just rewatched Sing Street the other night.
Yeah.
And there's like there's a whole beat of that movie of happy sad is like this, the way, I think they're trying to describe The Cure at the time. Because his older brother, the Burnout, is telling him to write something happy sad, and they throw on, I don't know if they throw on Love Song, but they throw on like a Cure song. And then of course that's like the next song they write in that movie is in that vein.
Yeah, which that movie's great.
That movie is great. I watched it on an airplane. Plane landed. Don't know how that movie ends.
Oh
it's
man,
on Netflix.
You're never gonna.
I'm kind of enjoying like this.
Dude, you gotta watch it.
All right.
Well, that's like,
I'm gonna go right now.
He's like
so good.
John Carney, right? Is his name? That like all those movies he makes.
Yeah.
Like What's the one he made with
Once, and then he made Begin
Begin
Again.
Again? That's like, I mean, it's people are. I love that movie more than I think it's like people feel good about it,
Probably.
but I just like love it.
Oh yeah, Begin Again. I didn't think it was that good.
I don't know. I think it's like, I don't know. It's great.
I will say that like if they wanted to cast a pop music douchebag, they casted the perfect dude.
Yes.
What's his name?
Adam
Levine,
right?
Levine, yeah, from Maroon 5. He couldn't. Sorry, Adam, but like he couldn't act for shit. But he was the perfect villain.
Yes, and I have a friend who I talk with movies about a lot, and we have very similar music tastes. And I remember telling her, like, you have to go see Begin Again. And she's like, I don't want to go see it. Adam Levine's in it. And it's like, no. He's in it in the best way. Like, he's the exact person you want him to be. He sucks.
And they truly make him hard to recognize at the beginning of the movie. Like, you know, for lack of a better, they put him like a sweater and glasses, and they just like take away some of his douchebaggery, and it succeeds because all of a sudden it's like it was something because he's like a folky artist at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And then, but the moment he starts to sing, I was like, wait a fucking second, this is that dude from Maroon 5. Like I was like, I'll recognize that voice anywhere, you know.
But yeah, I think it's just like he just does a good job. I think his movies are so good about like loving music. Like that's the theme of everything, and it's just all their main actors are just coming from this like place of loving music, and I can't help but like love that. I just get.
Well, I think the thing that maybe like got in the way in Begin Again is that like Once was a certified success, you know, but had to grow into being a success, a little bit of a cult hit, you know. But then all of a sudden he got a bunch of money and he got A-list actors, and I can only imagine like either a bit more studio meddling or maybe some kind of like shorter timeline or more of a balancing act in one way or another, whether that's like mostly on him or it's partially from the studio or whatever. And I think some of that kind of like storytelling that he's great at gets lost in that because of some of the schlock that was maybe more inherent in like a big name rom-com, which is like I think was the whole purpose of going back to Sing Street and being like, we're going to do it in Ireland with an Irish cast, was to kind of just like go back to what he's good at, you know?
Yeah, and I also just feel like, again, I think you're totally right, but it didn't bother me. I was like, okay with it. And I think it was like, the thing I like about Begin Again too is like, I'm a person who loves sappy rom-coms, and I loved it because it was like a rom-com, but music was the you know, like that was the romantic part of it. Like there wasn't that like, oh, there's going to be a relationship between Mark Ruffalo and Keira Knightley. It's like, no, it's their relationship is their music, like the music is what is, and I was like, great. I'm glad they didn't go down the road of like having them, spoiler alert for people, this movie that came out 4 years
that's
ago
like
that
a
nobody
happy
watched.
spoiler alert. I think that's the thing where like for most of the movie you're like, please don't let
if
them
anything
get
comes
together.
out of this conversation, if I convince you to watch Begin Again, and you can still hate it, but at least like know that it's not going to be a dumb rom-com.
It's also a New York movie. It's nice to watch. Fun to watch
that's
a New
the
York
thing.
movie.
Really good New York movie. Like the scene when they're running around at night with the splitter, and they're just like listening to music through the night, and they're walking through the city. That's beautiful.
That's a good wish I actually did that in New York kind of scene.
Yeah, exactly. Like
good. I guess
I'd love
wouldn't be
that.
that hard to find somebody to do that with, but I refuse.
Yeah. Well, Sing Street spoke to me in a way because like it does have those sappy moments of like like the kid gets real bummed about the girl leaving or whatever, and especially like thinking back to like Death Cab and when Death Cab were really popular. I was living in Western New York. And so like instead of running around New York wearing splitters, you're driving around Western New York through the middle of nowhere, where a song like this would probably come on, and like it's snowing, it's dark, it's depressing, and it's like the perfect weather and locale to listen to something like this.
Yeah, I think it's like he does a good job of picking different points in your life to romanticize with the music, where like I think you're right, like Sing Street is romanticizing that time in your life where you're not an adult yet and you're like falling in love with girls and music. And I had that. Like I didn't go to parties or anything in high school, and I like my friends and I, there was a few nights where we would just like drive around in like my friend's Jeep, and we'd have like an acoustic guitar and just like shakers and stuff, and we would just like go to the park and then just kind of like jam out in the car and like listen to Arcade Fire or what. Like I distinctly remember listening to like Arcade Fire's funeral while this was happening one time, but it's just like that's what we did, and it was like I don't know. Yeah, so like Sing Street, I feel like hits that really well.
Yeah. But this song too, it sounds like, is like a bit of a gateway drug for you, probably into the world of like indie rock, which is even nowadays is almost like, I was thinking about this the other day. It's like basically contemporary rock is what indie has like evolved into, right?
That genre was just sort of made up, and then
it used to be.
It used to be a credible,
and now it's like what everyone listens to, sort of, or like not like everybody. But it is what
that's my genre.
It is what popular music is for the most part.
Yeah, or like our version of like I don't think it's popular, but it's like that's like the. I don't know a ton about music, but I know so much about this very specific like sliver of music, and like that came from learning about Death Cab, and then like diving into this hole, and I was like, oh, there's other bands that aren't Smash Mouth. Like, this is amazing.
Right.
And yeah, it was like it was the same time too where I was like learning about going back to like movies. I remember the same girl, Caitlin, like introduced me to Garden State, and it was just, which is the dumbest thing, but it was like at the time that was
a dual gateway.
It was like that the entire gateway of everything, because then it was like, oh, independent movies, like that's because I was like doing movie stuff. I was taking movie classes in high school. Like my high school had this really cool video program that I was doing, so I was opening up, like a lot of things were opening up to me at this time in terms of like arts, and I was like, whoa, there's a lot out there that I did not know about, and then kind of like dove down this hole for a bit.
Right. Well, and that like genuinely influenced your life, right?
Oh yeah,
because I mean, you make videos, you make movies, you do stuff like that.
Exactly. And I think it was like I had this, there was definitely that point, or so when I like when I like applied to college, I was applying to everything as like chemical engineering, and I got into all my colleges as like chemical engineering majors.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to do this. And I changed to communications and like media studies and video, and I had all these concentrations and stuff, but I think it was like my parents, they like had this little moment of like, oh no. And it's like something my mom would still talk about. And eventually my parents were like, we're proud of you. You figured it out. Like you saw something that we didn't see. And I was like, no, really, I just wanted to do this thing that I loved doing, but I knew that there was something to it. But yeah, it was like that was all influenced by me kind of like falling into this world of like, there's stuff out here that's doable. And I think it's like, the whole world is opened up too, and just in terms of like you can buy a camera for $1,500 and then like make whatever you want. And I mean we're making a podcast right now. Like we live in this world where like media is so much easier to get access to, and I think I lucked out in doing what I'm doing at the time that I'm doing it because it's just everywhere.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was just to add on to that, like especially when Death Cab first came about, and that time period was really great because that's also when the internet started to be on the upswing of like music discovery. Because I listened to music in high school, and like I had the Warped Tour compilations, and like cool, and like if you asked me in high school if I was a music fan, I'd be like, yeah, I know everything and whatever. But it wasn't until like, Napster or mp3.com where you started finding these bands where you're like, oh, these are just some guys down in Texas or down in Florida or whatever, and they're just doing a thing.
Yeah.
And that I always found to be so inspiring, because it's like, oh, well, if you're just a couple of kids doing this, then yeah, no, I can do that too.
Yes. It's just the whole world opened up. I feel like I had a buddy in college who he was a DJ. His DJ name was DJ Tanner, based on Full House. And he had a bunch of music. And one of the songs that he like mixed or whatever, he used the sample of the drum box in Photobooth, like in his songs. And it like was this weird, again, it was like this thing of this song came back in my life at this weird time, because it was a really good song that he had mixed or whatever, but he was like playing with that drum box over, which you didn't hear in the sample. But if you listen to the Death Cab version, you'll hear this weird drum box that they also use in Transatlanticism. It's that same, which I don't know if you've ever seen, you seem to be a fan. Have you seen like Death Cab in concert?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, it's like, I've seen them in Boston, New York City, and LA. So I've had like, it's a continental from when I've seen them, but when they almost always play Transatlanticism, and they'll have that drum box kind of like come in slowly over like the last song, and you just start hearing it, and you're like, yes, here it comes. and it's so exciting. And the first time I saw him, it was with an orchestra.
Oh, that's
That's
cool.
awesome.
And it was, I know bands don't do this, but if you could see your favorite band with an orchestra behind them, it's like the coolest
I
thing.
got to see My Morning Jacket with the Boston Symphony Orchestra once.
Yes.
And it was like incredible. I think it was the first time I ever saw them too. And it was sick.
Yeah, like nothing,
It was so cool.
nothing lived up to that.
Well, the thing is, that was a really good show, but many of their other shows have lived up to that only because they had to be so quiet, and they're actually like a pretty raucous band live.
Yeah.
So like that was they only played their kind of like beautiful, calmer songs at that show because they just couldn't overpower. I believe even the drummer, they kind of had it dressed up with like some cloth and stuff, but he was playing an electric kit so that they could actually like balance
dial down.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But he was playing like an all electric kit. But it was great.
When I was a kid, somebody gave me the what was that? Metallica's S&M.
Oh, I loved that album, dude. I love that album.
It's real good, and like I was maybe 10. That's a cool album because it's Metallica with an orchestra.
Yeah, it's with the
I
San
don't know
Francisco
about this.
Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it was like it was in pretty lame Metallica years. Like it was right after Reload, maybe, or like after Garage Inc. or something. Like, I mean, maybe people that like more our age probably still thought Metallica was great at that age, but the kids that had grown up with them in the 80s, they were like total sellouts by that point. You kind of were like done with them, those few albums. But I don't know that S&M won back their like hardcore 80s fans, but S&M was like a really fun album
real cool.
within like their 90s career.
Yeah.
I think it came out in like 99 or 98 or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
But it was fun because that was, they could play loud.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was all recorded like really well and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I still think about that like orchestra experience, and it was like, man, this is like adds this whole level. And I like Guster played with the symphony orchestra at some point, which I'm the Boston Symphony Orchestra, but I saw them once play with like a small orchestra at the Met, and they had just come out with this. I don't know if you guys know Guster at all, but they're like a big band that's been around my life for a while.
They're
but
from
like
Tufts University right next to where I grew up.
Yeah, exactly. So they had that album Easy Wonderful. And like the album cover is this circle, and it's all like kind of like bike spoked, and they're all colored in or whatever. And they had the guy who made the album art, like making the album live on stage. Like he was recreating the album live on stage during the concert.
Yeah.
And I was like, this would only happen at the Met. Like they have like some strings playing with them and the guy recreating the album. But that was like a cool concert experience too. I would put up there with the Death Cab and the orchestra.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice I think one thing that's nice is those, every genre can become so like insular, to like, it feels like maybe a lot of the same band to band, but also like, oh, this band, I get what they do, and becomes a bit predictive, and so it's predictable, and it's nice to see them have to work with like something outside of their own general sound and general genre,
Yeah, just like let them open up a bit musically, because then they're like, oh, these people are like very talented musically, and it's not just this one specific thing they do. Like, oh, this is something so much bigger than this one specific metal genre or whatever, like Metallica or whatever.
Right.
And that's something that I've heard numerous people say about Weird Al's polka medleys. Because, it takes all these like super popular songs and just dump them into polka, and
it makes you realize like polka's fun as hell. It's just that like I don't speak, Czech or whatever, so I can't understand it, or Polish or like whatever languages it's usually in. And so it's just like, oh, well, but if you give me the songs I know and understand, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, this is like, you can dance, you can have a good time. This is a fun genre.
Yeah, like musically, the tempo, you can dance to that tempo pretty
That's
easy.
like what it is, basically. It's, like European dance music.
Yeah.
Back in the day. EDM, European dance music.
The original EDM.
Yeah, polka is the original EDM. It's
the ad campaign they've been pushing around Europe
for like 300 years. They've been trying to get it rolling, and then all of a sudden electronic music came in and really decimated it. Speaking of prolific artists that have been backed by symphony orchestras, Carly Rae Jepsen recently played with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra.
Ooh.
Yes.
I don't know if they
bootleg of that.
Yeah, there was a bootleg of it. It's very low quality.
It is very low quality.
But I wonder if they recorded it. Like, there wasn't any chatter about it being recorded. But it seems like one of those things.
Yeah,
this day and age,
It must have been recorded.
this day and age, with like how easy it is to really record shows,
Yeah.
you would think that like they did it
Yes.
somehow. Whether it's
Yeah.
going to get like released as like an album or not is a whole different thing. But
Yeah. I would imagine if they're probably
think it would
holding
show
on
up.
to it. Because when Nirvana, or like the remaining members or
Mm-hmm.
Nirvana played at St. Vitus a couple years ago, they recorded that.
yeah,
And they've just been holding on to it so they can do something with it.
yeah,
But
I could see that.
I would listen to Carly Rae with an orchestra. Like, Call Me Maybe, the strings on that are the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, my favorite part of that song. It's just like that
Yeah.
little, man, it's good.
I think I like listening to the bootleg. It's like, yeah, not everything translates perfectly. I mean, you're talking about pop dance music,
Yeah.
so it's like to tone it
Yeah.
down that much, it's definitely a different vibe.
Mhm.
But it's cool. There's some article came out a couple weeks ago trying to compare Carly Rae and other pop artists, but like they used her name in the headline, like the like current pop music to like the complexity and amazing musicality of Mozart. And dude, I mean, I like pop music, but it was the biggest.
like, this is the big
it was the
you're
biggest like
stretching-
sack of
you're
shit.
stretching
compared-
a bit here.
oh god! But I guess it was based off of actually a pretty cool podcast that I was they were referencing in the show. Great podcast. I can't remember the name of it, but Hooked on Pop, maybe something like that. It's these two guys
Okay.
out of Fordham, and it's a cool show. But the article I think was stretching that connection a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that show's kind of about like diving into the actual like music theory of pop music.
Yeah.
Which is a very cool thing because everyone generally, you dismiss not just like radio pop music, but popular music. You kind of dismiss as being low on the musical talent or kind of like sophistication scale.
Well, I just feel like that's something too where it's like, yeah, I think that's like the perception, but then it's like these people are super talented musically. Like somebody like Taylor Swift, right? It's like she's extremely talented musically, or like I feel like Carly Rae is the same thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like they just are in this genre that for whatever reason they chose,
Yeah.
or they just
I don't know. Sometimes I don't totally know. Like, it's never a thing to dismiss their talent. I only say it to like lift up talents that don't get recognized.
Yes.
Because like
Yeah.
my
Yeah, it's like,
presumption is that
why-
like most working recording jazz musicians are musically
Yes.
probably more talented than most working performing pop musicians. Like, it's my general assumption. But there is a certain kind of talent about being able to write hooks and being able to write things that people like. It is maybe it's like this sidestep talent to music composition, but it is certainly something that is, I mean, it's hard to write a hit.
I
Like
think
people say pop music sounds the same, or it's like, these songs are simple, but it's, you're operating within a simple pool and trying to pull out something that sounds unique and fresh and, whatever.
And I think people look at complexity and see that and go, oh, okay, it's more complex, therefore it's better.
Right.
So they see like a jazz musician and, rate them differently than, I don't know, a DJ that goes up with just a laptop. Right.
Yeah.
And, like there are some people that go up with just a laptop and hit play and walk away, and that's whatever. But like putting together a song is a hard thing to do.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
there's,
just
like,
different skills, right?
Yeah.
It's like
legitimate
there's
work
carpenters
involved.
that build
Yeah.
houses and architects that design them, and there's like a plumber that has to come in to do this part of it. And in theory, people may be assigned different like skill levels to all those things, but the reality is that like the architect can't build the wall. It's hard to do that. Yeah. You need someone that can build a wall to build the wall,
Yeah.
we're trying to get Donald Trump's working on it.
We're talking about that wall. That's the wall we're talking about. So I think many music fans maybe do this, but I would think maybe you do it more than others. And since we're talking about movies, do you often like visualize your life to music that you like?
Oh yeah.
You like soundtrack your own
Yes.
day, kind of?
Like specifically recently too, with like that Waxahachie album, there's a song Silver, and it has like such a good tempo to it, and I'm like, this should be at the beginning of like any comedy, like teen comedy establishing shot, like moving, like in my head I'm thinking like almost like an Easy A type movie where it's
Yeah.
like you see the campus and you're just getting the aesthetic, like that song should be over every one of those. It just is like fun, good song, like first day of the movie type song. Like I do that. I used to do that, and like when I'd like sit on buses going home from school in high school, it'd be like putting together my soundtrack for the day as I was sitting around. But like specifically with Death Cab, I remember when their album Codes and Keys came out, which came out, I think it was like May 21st, 2011 or something like that. If I only remember this because I was in London, like studying abroad. I was making like documentaries over there with like with Northeastern, and it was like at the time where I was saying like I've been listening to Waxahachie all the time. I was listening to that the entire time I was in London. It just became this album that really like worked, like everything. And it just the song, like I remember we had to write these dumb blog posts like you have to do when you go abroad or whatever, of like your experiences, and I wrote one that basically took that album, and each song I like tied to my experiences with London, and I was one of my like the posts I was happiest writing, and my teacher was like, "Oh, can we get something with a little more substance?" I was like, "What? I was really happy with this." Like, one of the songs is like "Home is a Fire," and I was talking about like the big fire in London, like what is like 1666 or whatever, and it's just like like when you walked around London, it was like you would see that the existence of that fire and their history everywhere, like the exit signs, like all it just like they're so aware of this fire, and I was like, home is a fire, this is it, I'm in London, and she was just like not buying it. I was like, what is going on? But that was definitely like my soundtrack of London, was that album.
That's fun. Now you saying that actually reminded me that I one time was studying abroad one summer in Florence, Italy, and there's this hillside town next to Florence called Fiesole, and it's like it's the type of thing you jump on a bus, you ride the bus to the end, and it goes up a hill outside of the town. You can like look out over the town, right? Beautiful, gorgeous. Probably like a 30-minute trip on a bus. And for some reason one night, I grabbed my iPod and was like, you know what? I'm just gonna walk towards Fiesole, which is I couldn't tell you how long that walk is. It probably would take 3 hours. Like it's, it's a whole nother town away and it's up a hill. But I started walking north is just the direction. And one of the albums I put on was the Postal Service.
Yeah.
And as I walked up this hill, this like winding Italian road up a hill, I just started having this like very long conversation with myself about like, because I think I got tired is what was happening. And this album was playing the whole time. I got tired, and I kept imagining like every car that went by me, like, oh, maybe they would stop and pick me up. Or like I bet if I put my thumb out, maybe someone would actually just give me a ride back to town, was kind of how I was imagining it. And for some reason that translated into this story in my head and this conversation where like the person who pulls over is God. I'm not a religious person at all, like ever.
You're having a fever dream.
Yeah, this was like truly, because I was like, I'd been walking for a very long time. I'd been listening to many different albums, but this was while I was listening to Give Up, and it was just this whole thing of God's like, hey, you can have this car, but also like this car will have unlimited gas. It can go wherever you want. It can go across the ocean, and it was just this thing of like, where do you want to go? I can make it possible for you. Like that's essentially what like the I don't know what the parable was or whatever, right?
It's just existing in your head.
It's like this thing of like God's letting you do anything you want right now. And this was not the summer after I graduated. This was the summer after my freshman year of college. So I'd still think this is very like apt of like, hey, you have your whole life ahead of you. You can do whatever you want.
You're still very coming of age there.
And I think the reality though is that I was just really tired of walking.
And you got
I only got halfway up the hill and I had to turn around.
Yeah, like no car got you.
Yeah, no car got me. And
God
didn't find you.
Yeah, God doesn't exist, which is the moral of the story. But yeah, that's like my association with that album.
Yeah, like
even though I've heard it a million other contexts and times.
What's your like strongest album association?
So the new one for me is so I went to Iceland earlier this year, and we listened to the Hamilton soundtrack a lot.
Okay.
So now Hamilton associates to Iceland
with
for me,
which is just doesn't.
That doesn't make any sense. But what makes even less sense is now because our friend Tony had bought himself a data plan. Less Than Jake and Korn also now remind me of Iceland. So, that's a thing in my life now.
Yeah. Maybe Iceland will learn from you. And those bands will just have a real uptick.
They took this weird...
It was like, I had these like these delusions now of like going to Iceland and like listening to Sigur Rós and like cinematic and like
beautiful
explosions
music
in the sky and whatever. And I was driving down the highway and we saw these. It's
that was pretty good.
yeah, just giant mountains and that.
Not what I'd expect.
And this dumb little rental car we had shaking because it couldn't handle the bass from that song.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. What's I guess going back to the soundtrack thing though.
Yeah.
Do you have, or maybe even like one you could think of, but something that's like an all-time opener to a movie or a show that you would want?
Oh man.
Maybe maybe it's based on a true story,
Man, like opening song is tough because it's like I feel like it's such a because it's like that again, like that Waxahachie one. It's like that's a good opener if you're just trying to like, because in my head the movie I'm always writing is just like a day in the life like a day in the life comedy type something, and it's like,
is credit song easier?
Yeah, credit song. Well, it's funny. The first thing I thought of when you said like credit song is I don't know if you guys know the Weakerthans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But they're like one of my favorite bands. They're good. I'm really big into like good storytelling bands. Like just part of who I just love stories in general, and I really like a good storytelling band. And they have a few good story songs. But it's really funny because their most famous, I guess, like the song that has the most notoriety is not Left and Leaving, Aside. Because it was the credit song for Wedding Crashers, which is like the weirdest. They're not that it doesn't match.
I would never associate those two things.
They're just like this kind of Canadian chill band, and that's definitely their rockiest song probably, I would say. But it's just, I just remember watching that movie and being like, guys, it's the Weakerthans. Like the movie's ending and everyone's like, what? The movie's
like
over.
No one's takeaway from Wedding Crashers.
Yeah. I mean, I love Wedding Crashers, but that was the thing I was probably most excited about Wedding Crashers is that the Weakerthans was in it.
Yeah.
They would probably be in my soundtrack somewhere. They have some good...
Don't they do A Plea from a Cat Named Virtue?
Yes.
That's one of my...
Oh my God.
That's probably one of my favorite, indie rock songs of all time.
Well, do you know the sequel and then the other sequels? Oh, man.
I don't.
So, this is...
I gotta get in.
So, there's a song on their album, what is it? It's... Reconstruction Site, I think, is the one that the Plea from a Cat Named Virtue, and it's basically a song that's sung entirely in the point of view of a cat.
Yeah, it's great,
and it's all about how this cat is upset with their owner because they're not paying them attention, and they're sort of wasting their life away, and the cat just wants them to just get your life together, basically. So then the album that came out after that was called Reunion Tour. And they had a song on it called Virtue the Cat Explains Her Departure. And it was all about how the cat was leaving because the guy didn't get his life together. And it's so sad. I mean, it's my really good friend Em, we bonded over the Weakerthans, and she can't listen to that. It's very hard for her to listen to that song. And I love that's the difference between us. It's I'm somebody who loves the emotion. That emotion is so... And if you listen to them back to back, it's a little too much. It's but then John K. Samson, the Weakerthans broke up, and he's been doing solo stuff, and he just came out with a record a few months ago. I think it's called Winter Wheat, and there's 2 songs on. It was this thing I thought it was over, and neither one of them is great, because one of them is about how the cat, the guy went to a treatment center to get help. The story got a little too, the world got a little too big.
Yeah, this was the sequel no one asked for. He's in rehab now.
No, we had this nice story arc of the cat wanted change, the guy didn't change, and the cat's leaving. We didn't need any more. And I was even reading into it, and there was stories about the cat's not actually alive anymore. This is this is too deep to be getting into these songs. But oh man.
So there's like fan theories about where the cat's gone.
Yes. I got into like Reddit threads about it because I was like, I need to know.
That's where you find all the good stuff.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so good.
But oh god, those songs. There's oh man.
So wait, you said there's 2 on the new album? Or
Yes.
on his? So it was one is Rehab and...
I forget. I haven't listened to this album a lot, and they're not the best songs.
Yeah.
So it's tough. Hard. So I haven't been like listening to the album enough to know. And my friend has refused to listen to this. She won't even listen to the
Right.
song because she doesn't want the story anymore. She's like, I'm good. I think you just if you're going through the
Chronology.
arc, just stop at Virtue the Cat Explains Her Departure. Like you don't need the rest. It's like I'm trying to think of it's like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Like you
Right.
don't need that movie.
We don't want that.
It's like this is that for music sequels.
That's good advice. That's
Yeah.
sound advice. I think that's a good place to stop. Brian, thanks so much for talking to
thanks.
us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Where can people find out more about you or keep up to date on
Oh,
what's
man.
happening in your life?
Well, they can go to bryanberlin.com. If
Sweet.
they have a wedding coming up and want me to film it, they can go to bryanberlin.wedding.
Heyo.
I got a whole
Ooh,
two
fancy.
whole websites.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Evan and I are on a sketch team called The Executives, and we perform Friday nights, 7 p.m. at the Magnet Theater.
Yeah.
That's a fun time.
Check
That's
it
great.
out.
And then I'm around.
He's around,
Go to
everybody. You heard it here.
You'll hear me tell some stories somewhere, maybe. I don't know.
That's true. Yeah. Keep go to a lot of Moth events, and you will eventually see Brian.
Hey, you'll see me like nervously standing in the corner.
And social media people can find you at Bryan Berlin. Is that right?
I guess
Or Berlin Nation.
my full like social media branding is Berlin Nation with one N as the in between. If you're really,
It's good. That's a good handle.
It's a brand that I've created for myself over the years. It's in like 7th grade I started that.
Oh wow.
So
You've stuck with it.
like that's my
Time-tested.
LLC. Like Berlin Nation LLC
Oh,
is like
nice.
a business that I've registered. So
You've
I've committed to it.
Yeah, that's also a good lesson. Everyone, make sure you commit to something, especially if it's an LLC.
Real hard.
Real hard. Thanks so much. This has been Repeater.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Repeater is hosted by Evan Ford Barden and Patrick Cartelli. This episode was recorded at Magnet Training Center in New York City, where they offer classes in improv, musical improv, sketch writing, storytelling, and more. Find out more at magnettheater.com. Visit us online at repeater.show for live dates, hot music tips, and show archives. Theme music by the Sun Lions. Everything else by Love Nest Productions. Welcome to Repeater.